I just want to welcome everybody who's joining us on Facebook as well. You're very, very welcome. This is All Out's Undistance panel. Today we are talking about what pride means to me. We're going to speak to these incredible activists from around the world, talking and getting from them some really sort of personal reflections on what this season and this day means for them and their lives and their journeys in activism. So we are now going to be starting with just a little bit of musical entertainment. Thank you so much, Bisi, for making the introduction to Kafayat Quadri, who's going to entertain us now. Kafayat is a really talented poet and musician from Nigeria. Her music touches both on the light-hearted side of life, but also the more serious. And outside her art, she has a PhD in international criminal law and is a research fellow at the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. So I'm going to ask my colleague Matthias just to play the VT, and we have a beautiful song from Kafayat to kick us off this afternoon.
Oh yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Kafayat Quadri and I'm delighted to be supporting All Out's Undistance Pride Festival. I'm sending love and light from Nigeria. Happy Pride. Mwah! So I'm going to be singing you guys a song titled The Purpose. So the purpose is supposed to encourage you. Yeah? Never mind the noise in the background, never-ending cussing and battering. Just lift up your body, take a stroll down the street, looking in the faces, 'cause there's a mirror at every corner of our lives. You're truly the best. Just give it another try, another try, another try. We're entwined, bubbles of togetherness, harmlessness, selflessness. These beaties, milk into butter and cheese. Listen, they say you cannot do it. They know not what they talk about. You see, you have a different purpose and destiny. The world is waiting for you. Be who you want to be. Everyone's writing a story. Take charge and dispose of the frenemies, of the frenemies. This altered honey is not made from bees. Stand well and be well. When I'm entwined, bubbles of togetherness, harmlessness, selflessness. This is not a sermon, sweet lemonade from lemon. Entwined, bubbles of togetherness, harmlessness, selflessness. This is not a sermon, sweet lemonade from lemon.
Thanks so much to Cafayette. And I now want to introduce our wonderful panel. I'm going to start with Kevin Jennings. Kevin, you're welcome. Kevin is the CEO of Lambda Legal, the oldest legal advocacy group in the United States fighting for LGBTQ equality and everyone living with HIV. In his past life, Kevin helped students create America's very first gay-straight alliance in 1988 and went on to found GLSEN in 1990, America's first national organization fighting anti-LGBTQ bias in schools. In 2009, Kevin became President Obama's Assistant Secretary of Education for Safe Schools. He then went on to run the Arcus Foundation, the world's largest funder of LGBTQ rights, and he is an executive producer of Welcome to Chechnya, a film, a truly wonderful film, detailing the campaign against LGBTQ people in Chechnya, which I believe is airing today on HBO, right, Kevin?
Airing tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States on HBO, and tomorrow night at 10 p.m. London time on BBC4 in the UK.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I would really recommend everyone who's in the UK or the US to find some time to watch the film. It's a truly incredible testament to what happened and is still happening in Chechnya. Dear Bisi, you are so welcome. Bisi Alimi is an angelic troublemaker. He is founder and executive director of the Bisi Alimi Foundation, a charity based in the UK, but working in Nigeria to accelerate social acceptance of LGBT plus people. He's a talented speaker and activist, and I'm also proud to say that he's a member of the All Out board. Welcome, Bisi. Peter, you're also so welcome. Peter Tatchell has campaigned for human rights for, mark this number, 53 years, since 1967. He's an activist he was an activist in the Gay Liberation Front in the early 1970s and was a founding member of OutRage. In 1990, he helped organize the UK's, he helped organize the UK's first Pride in 1972 and has marched in all 48 London parades since then. Every single one, 48 London parades. In 1973, he staged the first LGBT plus protest in a communist country, East Germany. His international solidarity activism has resulted in him being beaten by President Mugabe's bodyguards in Brussels in 2001 and by Russian neo-Nazis in Moscow in 2007. He is a hero of our movement and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us. You're so welcome. Alessandra Ramos Ali, you are also so welcome. Ali is a Brazilian translator and activist on LGBTI rights, especially those of trans and gender non-conforming people. She's also an anti-racism activist. She's national coordinator of Aliança LGBTI on trans affairs, and she co-runs a national project on building capacities for trans leaders in the National School of Public Health in Brazil. And last, but by no means least, the one and only Kasha Jacqueline is one of the leading figures in the Ugandan LGBT movement and in Pride Uganda. She's co-founder and former ED of the LGBT plus group Farouk. She's also the founder and executive director of Kuchu Times Media Group. So Kasha, welcome to you. So we are gonna move on now with a little experiment where we are gonna just set the scene for the questions that I'm gonna ask our panelists by just doing a little bit of live polling with our audience. We've never done this before on Zoom, and it will be a first. I need to just let our Facebook audience know that this functionality won't be available for you, but please do absolutely feel free to just put your answers in the comment boxes on Facebook, and my colleague Yuri will give me a sense of some of the answers coming through. So let's just start this off, and I can see that the first poll has been already actively participated in, and it's which year did you first attend Pride? If you haven't voted yet, please go ahead and place your vote there before I show you the answers. Okay, so we had one person from 1970 to 1975, and I think I can guess who that was. And really interestingly, we had 21% of people saying that this year would have been that the first ever Pride that they've attended, but it was cancelled. So you know, for those people who missed Pride this year, I'm so sorry. I hope that online events like this give you a little bit of an idea of what it will be like. It's probably not anywhere near as good. And I hope you look forward to going out on the streets and being who you are in 2021. Okay. I'm going to ask one more question if I can. How many Prides have you attended? Okay, I'm going to share the results again. And again, we had a fifth of the people who are online have never been to a Pride, and a good chunk, 28%, have actually been to more than 10. So we have a broad range there. And then the final question: why, if you have attended Pride, what is your most important reason for attending? Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Thank you for everyone who voted. And you can see there that that sense of community is really the issue that people drive people onto the street for Pride. And we at All Out very much notice that it is a precious moment of community for so many people around the world. And let's hope we can all get back onto the streets in 2021 with Pride. So I'm going to move on to our panel discussion now. As we go through the questions, please feel absolutely free to use the Q&A function if you're in Zoom to ask questions. I'm going to integrate those questions into the discussion as we go through the conversation. If you're on Facebook, you can also add those questions to the comment box and they will be passed through to me. So I think, Peter Tatchell, you have to be the person who I asked the very first question. I want you to tell us about your first Pride. Just remind us which year it was. What did you do on that day and how did it make you feel?
Well, I was one of about 40 people who helped organise Britain's first ever Pride Parade, which took place in London on the 1st of July, 1972. It was a huge gamble because back then, most LGBT plus people were not out about their sexuality. They would not dare show their faces in public. So we were very apprehensive about the number of people who would turn out. In fact, we were quite surprised and happy when nearly 1,000 people came out for the march. 1,000 people, we thought, wow, you know, this is the beginning of something. From small beginnings, bigger things will grow. The policing was very intimidatory. The police were quite aggressive. We were pushed and shoved. Some officers openly abused and insulted us. Back then, there was nothing we could do. As we marched through the streets, probably about a third of the public were overtly hostile, jeering, booing, spitting at us, throwing cans, bottles, and coins. The police did not intervene to arrest any of the assailants. When we shouted back at them, we were shoved and pushed and threatened with arrest. But, you know, despite that atmosphere, you know, we were determined to be out and proud. And we very much had a carnival atmosphere, but also very strong political demands for the repeal of LGBT plus laws, solidarity with other oppressed communities and movements, and an agenda about social change. We were not interested in equality because we saw the status quo as unequal. we did not want to be equal within an unjust system. So our agenda was liberation, emancipation, and social transformation. Looking back, I feel so honored and lucky to have been there, and so awed by the way in which Pride has grown, but so sad the way it's become depoliticized, commercialized, and corporate in Western countries. I think most Western prides really have lost and strayed from the roots of Pride, which are both about a celebration, but also a protest for LGBT plus rights. You know, we still don't have full, absolute freedom here in Britain, and certainly we know we have to stand in solidarity with heroic LGBT campaigners in countries like Uganda, Russia, Iran, and so on.
Thanks so much, Peter. And we've lost visuals on Kasia, but I hope she's still there, because what I want to do now is kind of call out that kind of bridge of history, really, that exists between Peter and Kasia, because Peter and his colleagues, comrades, risked so much when they first went onto the streets of London, and Kasia, when she first started organizing Pride in Uganda, did exactly the same, but 45, 50 years later. Kasia, tell us about your first Ugandan Pride. Which year was it? What did you do? And how did it make you feel? And it looks like the internet connection with Kampala is not being our friend. So I'm going to come back to Kasia in a moment. Kevin, let me put the question to you. Which year was your first Pride? And tell us a little bit about how you felt on that day.
Before I answer your question, let me first of all just thank you, Matt, and All Out for the incredible work that you do. And just to say how incredibly humbled I am to be on this panel. Peter, first of all, it's good to see you again. Thank you for your legendary contributions to our movement. Bisi, good to see you again. And Alessandra and Kasia, the courage that you all have in doing your work. I feel like a complete wimp next to the three of you. You are just remarkable, remarkable human beings. And I'm so grateful to share this virtual stage with you. My first Pride was in 1986 in Boston, Massachusetts. It certainly was not the horrific experience that Peter had in 1972, but it was very different than the prides we have today, which Peter rightfully noted have become highly corporatized in the West and highly commercialized. It still felt more like a protest than a corporate marketing opportunity. And I was at the time a high school teacher, and in the United States, there was only one state that protected you from being fired from your job based on your sexual orientation, and that was the state of Wisconsin. Both as a practical protection and also a political statement, teachers tended to march wearing paper bags with eye holes cut in them because teaching was one of the worst occupations to be LGBT in. Teachers were stereotyped as threats to the safety of children, and it was virtually impossible to be an out LGBT teacher in the 1980s. And it was a real political statement to take part in a pride, even in the mid-1980s. It also was an incredibly, and I love that Peter used the word liberation. It was a liberatory act to take place in a pride. And I'll never forget that feeling of being on the street in a time when we were so thoroughly taught to be ashamed and to keep our heads down. And the feeling of defiance of being out on the street and being out and proud was revolutionary. And then probably the most impactful experience I had was the next year in 1987, when America had its second national march for LGBT rights in Washington, DC. And I believe about 250,000 people gathered from around the entire country and took part. And it was that march that actually propelled me to come out of the closet as a teacher, which pretty much made me a unicorn in the United States in the late 1980s, and to create the organization GLSEN. So Pride for me was a really seminal experience in helping me find my voice and becoming an activist. And, you know, Peter and the people who really created the Pride movement in the early 1970s, I owe you a debt I can never repay.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and I very much agree. Kasia, we lost you for a moment, but I was about to come to you. And what I was trying to do is kind of get everyone to kind of imagine this bridge of history that links you and Peter, that both you and Peter took and take incredible risks in order to enable your communities to celebrate Pride. There's a gap of multiple decades between those two moments. But as one of the founders of Pride in Uganda, and therefore an activist of incredible courage, could you tell us about your first Ugandan Pride? What was that like? How did it make you feel? How did it serve the community that you work with? Oh, you're on mute, Kasia.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I lost my network because I'm tethering from my phone. So I had to first take off my phone. Yeah. Listening to Peter, really, it's one of the reasons actually that keep me moving, listening to people like Peter who have moved decades and decades and are still doing this kind of work and not giving up. So for me, my first Pride was really a moment of, I think even if something happened to me today, it's okay. At least people will remember that even in Uganda, we did Pride. The reason for me was because I realized I'd attended so many Prides outside of my country, outside of my continent, and none of them was really near me, and none of them was really for me, especially when I was just being invited as a guest or a grand marshal and all that. And so I say that we don't really need to have the traditional prides like the whole world going on the streets, because we know the dangers that would come with it. But we can celebrate Pride in our own way. And it was 3 a.m. in a small hotel room in Amsterdam when I was checking my photos on Facebook because I was bored. And I realized that really, so many people in Uganda have only seen prides in movies. I've only heard of Pride from friends who have traveled. I've only seen Pride photos on internet. How about I bring Pride close to them? And I just opened up Pride page there and then. And so many of my own colleagues called me nuts. And I just responded to everyone and said, I guess I'm nuts. But I said, I cannot do this. Those who think I'm not nuts and who think that we can really do something about it, you're welcome to join me. There will be a meeting. It was the beginning. It wasn't easy because I really didn't know how to start Pride in such an environment. But people who joined me brought different ideas. We can start fundraising. We can talk to the community themselves. They're willing to pay money to different bars to just go in, and most of them get bashed and kicked out. They can donate that money to our parties that we host, and we put that money into the Pride basket. And slowly by slowly, we started hosting Pride parties. And I saw that people were really excited. There was a lot of fear, there was a lot of anxiety, but so many people came on board and said, let's do it. And if Kasia can say this, because so many people were motivated to join this movement because of talking to me, because of being in my circles, because of reading about me in the media, because of seeing me on TV. So many people say, if Kasia says we can do it, I'm sure we can do it. But I always warn people that you have to be ready, because it's not going to be easy. You have to know that it's going to expose you. You have to be able to wear shoes, ready to run away from any trouble. So I always tell people what could happen. I never lie my community that we can't do it without any harm. So people come knowing that it's not going to be easy. So I remember that day when police came at the beach. They came with dogs to attack us. And we had already told the community that we are going to lie behind being my birthday party. So in case police or the government comes, you start singing happy birthday, Kasia. And so that's what happened when the police came. And they came when I was the one, like speaking at the last day of Pride. And so everyone began singing happy birthday, Kasia. somehow, because I was already frustrated by seeing police surrounding our event, and I saw many of my colleagues panicking, some people even dived into the water because we're at the beach. I bluntly told my friends to stop singing the birthday. And I told them, let's sing Pride because there's nothing we can turn back. So people started singing Pride and all this. People ran. The dogs began attacking us. But I also went with my dog, which is also a guard dog like police, and it was trained by the police themselves. So there was a fight between us and the police, and they bundled us up. But we went singing and raising our rainbow flags on the police pickups behind, went the police stations. And already, because we're excited and we had achieved what we wanted to achieve, because we had already marched, we had already held 4 days of Pride, different Pride events. We had health events, we had trans events, we had different events throughout the week. So this was the last day. And they came when we were actually starting just to celebrate after the Pride March. So we said there's nothing they can do. We've already achieved what we wanted to achieve. So we refused to leave the police station. And for me, that is the time it hit me that we have actually done it. So I started crying and rapping for the president, for the police. We started dancing, running man for the police. We refused to actually leave the police station because we told them, why did you break us up in the first place? That's the time it hit me that we had actually had Pride in Uganda in a way that we didn't really anticipate. And so for me, looking back, 8 years back to when the first Pride started, and today in 2020, and seeing how things have come changing with different prides in Uganda, and seeing even how the world is changing, there's a very big disconnect. Because for us, it has always been about our visibility, building the community. And I've been to so many countries where I've seen Pride nowadays is about competition of different companies, competition of different organizations themselves in our own LGBT community. Who has the best event, who has the best party. So I see that for us, we see Pride somehow in a different way from the Western world. And when I see that, I'm like, let's not lose the focus that we started with, because we are still a young movement. We still have a lot to achieve. We can not be like when Peter started decades ago. Peter started decades ago, but you've seen even then when it started like us. But over the years, things have changed. I don't know when, Peter, you last attended the last Pride, but I do not want to also reach a point where I can no longer attend Pride Uganda because it's no longer on the same page the way we started it, because there are different generations that are coming after us who are here today. And this is what I always tell people, that we are not doing anything extraordinary today. We are actually just learning from those who were there before us, and we don't want to make the same mistakes they make. So it's our responsibility as who are here today to avoid those mistakes, but also not to make our own, so that the future generations also fall into the trap that some of us might fall in our time. So for me, Pride, actually many of my friends call me a Pride addict because I love Pride. I'll have Pride anytime, any day, and I do not even need a crowd to have Pride. I can even just be alone. Right now, I'm celebrating Pride. But the thing is, this Pride is about community. So I cannot celebrate Pride alone.
Thanks so much.
That is why I always reach out. Oh yeah, thank you for stopping me. I was going to go on until morning.
I just wanted to pull in the initial theme that we had that Peter set the scene with, which is and Kevin, which is liberation. And when I hear your story, and I've heard that story many times, but every time I hear it, even though they set the dogs on you, even though they intimidated you, the story of that evening is actually one of liberation, right? Because you did it, you celebrated Pride, and you overcame, and it's a truly wonderful story. Bisi, I want to come to you, and I just want you to share a little bit with us your own sort of personal journey of Pride and how it's affected you personally as a person. How's it changed you personally, politically, socially, sexually? What's your Pride story?
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be in the company of these amazing people. I feel so honored. I think my very first Pride was in 2007, and it was here in London. I just arrived, and it was the summer of 2007. And like Kasha said, you know, the closest I've ever been to Pride. I've been on TV or reading them in magazines. So, so Pride in London was happening. It was called London Pride then before it became Pride in London. So I tagged along with my friends who have been living here for some time. But I was equally very scared. I was very scared of, okay, you know, I have these nostalgic feelings of police will come and raid whatever is going on. You know, I had no idea what I would see when I get there. And I remember it was just mind-blowing for me. It was so humbling to see the match. And I always share this joke because I didn't know that the police in uniform will also be there. So when I saw the police marching, at one point I wanted to run away. And my friend was like, "Oh no, it's okay. The police do march." And I think at that point I broke down, and I just wish that, you know, I could have had a similar experience in my country. But I think going back to the experience, how it has changed me as I grew older, and I kind of see Pride. I see Pride beyond many spectrums. So I'm getting to see it beyond being on the street, right? I'm marching on the street. So what Kasha say about building a community and celebrating the community. And that on its own is an act of protest. Because people think that protest is about getting on the street and protesting. But the act of being and occupying a space in of itself is a protest. And so that was why I realized, and I had a flashback, that actually my very first Pride was when I was 18 in 1993, when I went to my first underground gay party in Lagos. That was actually my very first Pride. My very first Pride was not on the street of London. And I started redefining at that moment what Pride meant to me and what Pride is to me. And it wasn't until when I was on the street, because at that point, at the age of 18, I defied everything I've been taught, everything I've been taught to be. And I started belonging to a community. And, you know, trying to rephrase that and reshape that has actually given me even bigger context to what Pride is.
Thanks so much, Bisi. I love that story. I love that kind of first placing of your first Pride in the 2000s in London, but then that later recognition that came to you that no, you actually had been at a Pride, at a very different one, as in the way that Kasha had explained. So thank you for sharing. Ali, Pride in Rio and Sao Paulo appears to be a very, very joyous occasion. It feels like very much like a celebration. How does the concept of a celebration mix with the concept of a protest at Brazilian prides? And which do you think is sort of, which do you think comes out most strongly at Brazilian prides?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am very pleased to be here with you guys. I know All Out for quite some time now, and it's lovely to see the work you guys do all over the world, and all my brothers and sisters from African countries also. I salute you. Well, I've been to Pride. I've been to LGBT Pride. I've been to LGBT movement since 2000, the year 2000. So in Brazil, we have not had a long tradition until then of Pride parades. We had some movement around the 80s, 70s, student movements, but they didn't go too far. Then 1992, we had the first Pride organized by LGBT leaders. There was the outburst of HIV and AIDS, and in 1997, we had the first, as we know now, Pride that happened in São Paulo. I participated in the first Pride organization. I organized the first Pride I participated in particularly was Pride of 2002 in Rio de Janeiro, which was the comeback of the Pride in Rio de Janeiro. And I agree very much with Peter that what we see now is much more commodified. It's much more, you know, party and tourism, LGBT tourism money, and all of that, which I think it's a good asset if you know how to manage that and if you know how to pull that towards a more noble goal, which is liberation for everyone and for everybody. So in the beginning, we were much more concerned with talking about laws and having teachable moments within the Pride. I think Pride is really important, Pride celebrations, because it sets the calendar of the community. It opens a bridge for conversation with the society. That's how I see it. This is a very good and very important aspect. And also, but I am also always a little, how do I say that? A little incomodada. There is a word in English that I'm bothered, maybe that would be the best word to say, by the fact that trans visibility has been a problem and the Pride parades all over the world, not only in Brazil, and this has been the case in Rio and in Brazil as well. We have been failing into setting a real conversation with all LGBT, within all LGBT community about trans people and trans identities. And I think this has been very invisible within the community. And this is something that that bothers me a little bit about the Pride, about the parades around the world right now. But I really think it's a very important time in which we can gather and do something about our realities. We don't have the reality of a criminalized per se country, but we have numbers that prove that police brutality and violence in Brazil are very much present, especially in those times. The Pride Month, the Pride Parade is, you know, it's where we have many examples of police brutality, violence, mostly against Black LGBT people, that happens, you know, or in the surroundings of the areas where the Pride is taking place. And this is something that we also have to denounce. But I think we should carry through our legacy of Pride. I think this is very, very important, but not forgetting that we also as a community have a role to bring to others more awareness around about their rights. This is not only a party, it's also time to reflect. Party is very important. Party is very good and healthy for our minds and for our people. We have to get together. We have to experience our sexuality. And I think this is a very good opportunity, but we also have to take care about creating awareness on other LGBTIQ people so they can carry through our legacy with a speech that can really empower and liberate others and other in the same front.
Thank you so much, Ali. And like for the next part of the conversation, I just want to build a little bit on what you said and link it to the current reality in 2020. So this year, because of the global pandemic, so many prides around the world, over 500 prides actually, were cancelled. At the weekend, we had Global Pride online, and many organizations like All Out have run smaller Pride events and Pride festivals. I'm going to ask a couple of you this next question, and the time is pushing, so I'd ask you to be relatively brief. But you know, first of all, maybe to talk about what you think some of the upsides and the downsides are of that move to digital prides and Pride being online. But building on what Ali said, also maybe some comments on how, in a very strange and unanticipated way, the virus has actually created space for Black Lives Matter protests to intersect very significantly with the LGBTQ movements, both in Europe and in the United States, and for trans issues to actually receive a little bit more oxygen, I would argue, than they would otherwise. So I wonder if Bisi, you could kick us off on that with some comments on like the particularities of 2020.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you know, we organized an event for Ida Hobbits, and Kasha was part of the organizing community. And the feedback that we got from a lot of people was that that was the first time in their lives that they've ever been part of anything, right? And what is happening, and I've been trying to look on the good side of COVID-19. I know it's hard to find one. Yesterday, I was on a concert organized by the London Gay Men Chorus. And on that Zoom concert were 10 gay men from Nigeria who were seeing the London Gay Men Chorus for the very first time in their lives and being part of their event. What COVID had done, which we're not anticipating for, was the reality that we can create a community, and that community can actually be safe, right? That I can watch a program in the safety of my room or on my phone. I can be part of something that I long for. And I can see a future that is possible, that is not imaginary anymore. You know, like Kashi talked about, for a lot of us, pride on the continent of Africa is an imagination, right? But all of a sudden, you are actually being part of it and you're seeing it. And that is the beauty of what is happening at the moment, you know, and I'm not so hyped because we've lost a lot of people, many of them LGBT people. But what it has also done is that it has opened up that space. And I know it's not going to be like this forever, but one thing it has taught us is that maybe next time when we're organizing big events, there will always be a place to take it digital so that other people in the world can be part of the glorious community that we are.
Thanks so much, Bisi. Peter, can I put the same question to you? How do you analyze what's going on in 2020, the move to digital, but some additional oxygen perhaps for intersectional struggles with the racial justice movement and the trans movement? Oh, you're on mute, Peter.
Great. Hi, sorry about that. First, let me say that last Saturday here in London, the official Pride in London parade was cancelled, but there was an alternative parade by Gay Liberation Front veterans from the early 1970s. There are only 12 survivors who were able to make it, but we did march along the planned route to celebrate both the 50th anniversary of the London Gay Liberation Front and to reclaim Pride as a political march with human rights demands. And two of those demands were very appropriate. One of the demands was let people define their own gender identity, not doctors or the state, and solidarity with Black Lives Matter and LGBT plus people of color worldwide. So we want to make a very clear statement that although we were harking back to the Gay Liberation Front in the early 1970s and that tradition of radicalism, we also wanted to connect with the contemporary movements and support those contemporary movements for trans and Black rights. I think Bisi is absolutely right that online does enable people in remote communities or in repressive regimes to connect and be a part of something which they could not otherwise be. So that's fantastic. I've been recently involved in some online events where we've had people from Pakistan, quite small towns in Pakistan, tuning in and participating. They've never been to a Pride event before. They never had any dream or hope that they could, but through online virtual Prides, they were able to participate. However, having said that, I don't think there's any real substitute for the actual physical presence of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people coming together. that physical presence is an incredibly emotive, empowering experience. To be there in a physical place with so many other LGBT plus people and allies, it is really an enormous, extraordinary experience. So I think there's a place for both, and I think both can contribute.
Thanks so much, Peter. I really couldn't agree with you more. Having, for example, got to experience firsthand the first ever Pride in Swaziland, and to see that community coming together, about 300 people in Eswatini, you could sort of literally see people's personal batteries being powered up by that experience of coming together. Kevin, I want to take it stateside and kind of ask you a similar question in terms of the current, probably very specific experience of a very difficult year for your country. How has the Pride experience been this year in the US? The move to digital, but the Queer Liberation March taking place last week in New York City, and I think probably other cities, and of course the wave of protest around Black Lives Matter. Could you just give us a few of your thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly been a Pride Month like no other, I'll give it that. Between COVID-19, as well as the completely justified and long overdue protests around the embedded racism of our society. This has been an unusual month. And at the same time, there have also been some very encouraging things that have happened. Our Supreme Court ruled for the first time that LGBTQ people could not be fired from their jobs because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. And also in other things that people who care about justice care about, it ruled that you could not deport the so-called dreamers, who are undocumented young people in our country. And it also ruled yesterday to protect the rights of a woman to control her own body. So, you know, it's been, I call it the whiplash month. We've had, you know, horrific things and wonderful things happening all in the same month. I personally, around the Pride thing, I'm happy. In Los Angeles, they canceled Pride, and instead they had the All Black Lives Matter march. Instead, in New York, they had the Queer Liberation March instead of the Heritage of Pride March. I'm very hopeful that Pride will go back to its roots in some ways now. The roots of what Peter spoke of in his remarks at the beginning of this program. Pride began, and it's important to remember, it was a commemoration of a protest against police brutality, a riot against police brutality, which occurred at the Stonewall Inn on June 28th, 1969. It did not begin as a marketing opportunity for large corporations. And I personally think that some of the returning of Pride to its roots this year that's happened in the United States is exciting. And I hope that we will see that continue in years to come, that hopefully this was a reset, a long overdue reset, in my opinion, that will help return Pride to its original roots as a protest instead of as a marketing opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's incredible how COVID-19 and so many elements of our lives could be, if we grasp this opportunity, a way to reset things, a way to move away from business as usual. We've got a few questions coming in from the audience. I'd like to just do a shout out to the audience to feel absolutely free to send us your questions and comments. I'm going to move to those now. We're very rapidly coming out of time, but Maureen from Ireland, just, it's not a question, it's a comment, but she very much agrees with what Bisi said. She's a disabled lesbian living in Ireland, and COVID-19 has actually been a positive experience for Maureen within the LGBTQ plus community, because for the first time she's been able to attend lots of different events. Kasia, you have a shout out from Princess Ajara, who remembers the day on the beach and is just saying how proud she is of you. But a question, this one goes to Peter, and it's from Francesca in Nairobi. And this is really about your views and your thoughts on the way that police presence during Pride parades has changed over the years since the 1970s.
Well, it certainly is extraordinary that the police who shoved and pushed and insulted us in 1972 now march in uniform in the London Pride Parade and many other Pride parades around Britain. I've always said that the police would be more welcome if they issued a public apology for their decades of harassment and victimization. And no police service in Britain has done that, despite my call and the call of others that they should. So yeah, let's have the police in the Pride Parade, but let them make an apology first to show they recognize the wrong they did to us.
Great, thanks. And I have another policing question that I'm going to link to that one. And it's from Ranjit. And they ask, how do 2SL LGBTQ plus communities negotiate with the police? And the context given here, you know, in North America, police as a white supremacist, racist, transphobic, homophobic force killing Indigenous, Black and queer communities, but those same police marching in Pride parades. So as this has been related to the North America experience, perhaps Kevin, you could comment on that?
Yeah, I think that while I agree with Peter, we had such an apology last year in New York on the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And this year in the Queer Liberation March, the police attacked the marchers. So, you know, it was sort of ironic that on the 50th anniversary of the first Pride March, the police did the same thing they had done 51 years before at the Stonewall riot. So I think the problems are very deep, and that we need to stop investing in the traditional model of policing and start investing in communities, and look at alternative methods of conflict resolution. Clearly the way we are doing things now in North America does not work. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
No one can debate that at this point. And while what happened to George Floyd is completely horrific, it's important to recognize that that is not an isolated incident. Just 2 days after George Floyd was killed, Tony McDade, a Black trans man, was killed by the police in Tallahassee, Florida. I think people would like to imagine that what happened to George Floyd was some kind of, or some people would like to imagine was some kind of fluke. But as one internet meme has put it best, racism isn't getting worse in North America, it's just getting filmed. And we clearly need a complete new paradigm for public safety in America. And what we're doing right now isn't working. So let's move on and try something new.
Thanks so much, Kevin. In the last few minutes that we have, I'd like to, may not have time to go around to all of you, but just get a vision from you for the future of prides in your city or country. Kasia, I'd love to start with you because the history and the present and the future of Pride Uganda are certainly very close to my heart, and I think something that we're all sort of waiting on with anticipation to see where it goes from now. So give us your vision of the next few years of Pride in Uganda.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, for sure, because of the police brutality and the state closure of our prides in the past 4 years, we've decided that maybe this is the time for us, since there's this COVID regulations, so it will not be possible for us to really convene the way we would have wanted to. So it's a good opportunity for us as a community to go back and re-strategize. So we had a meeting last week where we sat and said, let's go back to why we started Pride. Why myself, I actually got all those insults. Who were the people I started with who encouraged me not to give up? So we had a meeting and said, there's a lot of digital prides going on this year. And maybe this is the time for us to use this opportunity to bring back Pride to Ugandans so they don't give up after 4 years of having Pride. And while we are doing that, let's also remind them that we are not giving up on the physical prides, because for me, I feel this is very important. And it was the reason why I got members of my community in a risky environment to get out of their houses, to get out of their father's homes, lying that they're going to visit. It was important for me to get them together to meet other community members, because the things they read about us in the newspapers from the evangelicals, from the ministers, from the government are terrifying to them. But when they come out physically and meet other people who are like them, I feel it's very, very important. And so, as one of the panelists say, that the physical is really important, but the times are different right now, so we have to go with the times. But for us as Uganda, it's now time for us to use this opportunity to tell Ugandans that let's go with the times, but using also these times to put back together a team that is going to take us forward, so that we are more prepared when we can convene again as a community, because so many people, so many members of our community are told they have demons. So many of our community have never actually met physically a person who is there, maybe openly, because we never know. We don't have signs on our walls to show that so and so is, But for me, I feel it's time for us to utilize the time we have, because we have to keep safe for us to be able to win this struggle. But at the same time,
I want to give Ali a moment just to tell us a bit of a vision. We've got 2 minutes left, and I'd love to just hear a vision for Pride in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, we just something very similar to what Peter said. We organized with trans, homeless, and LGBT people of color an event, a presidential event, because we thought it was important on last Sunday. But we also had the Pride moment in social media. We think this is an important moment for us to keep going with the conversation, that we got the attention of people in society and also our people in far to reach places. We have to keep going. We have to keep denouncing police brutality and institutional criminalization of LGBT phobia and behaviors. And I think that's an important pivotal moment for us in Brazil and in other parts of the world. And we're going to keep pushing the agenda. So we talk more about intersectionality of race and gender. We talk about our vulnerable ones, and we keep going forward with for more rights for LGBT people.
Wonderful, thank you, Ali. And I hope that vision, and I'm sure it will, becomes a reality for you and the people that you work with and for. We've run out of time. I kind of wish that the people on my Zoom screen now are actually in my living room, because I'd love to just keep chatting with you, like literally for the next sort of 7 or 8 hours. But we are limited to this 1 hour. I feel we've only touched the surface. I just want to thank you all so much for this hour, but also for the work that you do. All of you make the world for LGBT plus communities around this planet a better place. And we're eternally grateful for that work that you do. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's joined us both on Zoom and on Facebook. And wherever you are in the world, have a lovely day or evening. Take care. Bye-bye.